All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to continue our focus on answering this AIM question. How did the Allies win World War II in Europe? We started a station activity on Monday in which you guys were examining how World War II progressed to see how the Allies ultimately won World War II. Our focus today is going to be on Exhibit 4. Exhibit 4 highlights 1, 2, 3, 4 turning points that occurred in World War II that ultimately shifted the outcome of the war from what appeared to be an Axis victory over the Allies to an eventual Allies victory. So, quick review. Based on Exhibit 3, the Axis powers, especially Nazi Germany, in 1939, when World War II broke out, when actual fighting broke out in Europe, began using a new military strategy called Blitzkrieg that allowed them to take over and conquer opposing countries very, very quickly. They defeated Poland in just a few weeks. They forced countries in Northern Europe to surrender in the winter of 1939 into 1940, and then in just 6 weeks they had fought. After invading France, France surrendered. So that in 1940, it seemed very likely that the Axis powers would eventually defeat all the countries in Europe and control the entire continent. In 1940, the only country that the Axis powers had to defeat left to fight was Great Britain. So our focus today is what happened between this 1940 and 1945 that caused the Axis powers to surrender. We're going to focus on some turning points today. The first turning point we're going to look at is how Adolf Hitler and the Nazis were unable to force Great Britain to surrender between August of 1940 and May of 1941. Adolf Hitler had ordered his military to prepare an arrangement to launch an invasion of Great Britain. Great Britain is an island country. It's part of Europe, but not attached to mainland Europe. It's separated by the English Channel, which is right here. Adolf Hitler recognized that in order to defeat Great Britain, to invade the country, he needed to demoralize the people of Great Britain so that they weren't ready to fight, and then also to attack industrial centers so that they couldn't produce goods needed to fight or defend themselves against Nazi Germany. And with that in mind, he ordered his Air Force to bomb and attack areas throughout Great Britain between August of 1940 and May of 1941. And ultimately, due to some technological advances, like the use of radar and the excellent fighting techniques of the British Royal Air Force, the British were able to prevent the Nazis from gaining control of the air over Great Britain. That would have enabled Nazi Germany to launch a land attack against Great Britain. And in 1941, instead of continuing to bomb Great Britain, instead of continuing to dedicate resources to attacking Great Britain, Nazi Germany and Adolf Hitler decided to shift their focus somewhere else. And that brings us to the next turning point. Because in June of 1941, despite the fact that Adolf Hitler had a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union, Adolf Hitler launched what's called Operation Barbarossa. And Operation Barbarossa was the Nazi attempt to invade and take over the Soviet Union. So from June of 1941 into December of 1941, just like in every other instance where they used the Blitz, Nazi Germany advanced deep into the Soviet Union territory. As summer turned to fall, it seemed very likely, in fact, the United States had intelligence that the Soviet Union was actually going to surrender and fall to the Soviet Union. But instead, the Soviet Union withstood the Nazi Blitz, especially in the winter of 1941, and actually turned the Nazis back around. Instead of, after December of 1941, instead of Nazi Germany pushing into and winning battles against the Soviet Union regrouped and started to push the Nazis back from Eastern Europe towards Poland and Germany. In the United States, the role that the Soviet Union played in winning World War II is not really understood. I've provided a couple links, 2 links down here, 1 and 2, that you guys can click on to read about how important the Soviet Union was to winning World War II. 26 million Soviet subjects, people of the Soviet Union, died in the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union. 16 million civilians, 11 million soldiers. The Soviet Union withstood, of any country, the greatest loss of life due to a Nazi invasion, but the Nazis actually suffered their greatest losses. I think something like over 90% of their losses in World War II were fighting the Soviet Union. And because the Soviet Union was able to withstand the Nazi Blitz in 1941 and then turn around the Nazi army and start pushing it back and win its own battles, that was a really important point in World War II. Between 1941 and 1945, the Soviet Union won battles in Eastern Europe to push the Soviet Union, or the Soviet Union won battles to push Nazi Germany back out of the Soviet Union toward and back towards Germany. 1941 was also, that December was also really important because that is when Japan bombed and attacked Pearl Harbor. And when Japan bombed and attacked Pearl Harbor, that was a significant moment because the United States entered World War II with its entire military force behind it. And that was really significant because up to that point in time, just like it looked as though Germany and Italy was going to take over all of Europe, it looked really a lot like Japan was going to take over all of Southeastern Asia. When the United States got involved, though, it changed the tide of the war, especially in the Pacific. The United States also played a major role in 1944 in the defeat of the Nazis, though. And that, the United States started to provide a great deal of military supplies and medical supplies and food to the Allies to defeat the Nazis, but they also provided a great deal of military support, especially in the June invasion of the northern part of France in Operation Overlord, which is commonly known as D-Day. On June 6, 1944, with the Soviet Union pushing Nazi Germany back towards Germany from the east, the United States, Great Britain, and other Allied forces launched an invasion of Normandy Beach, which was held by the Nazi forces. And I'm going to scroll down to another map. This invasion took place in this Normandy region, this northern region of France. So British, American, Canadian forces, other Allied forces on boats landed on the beaches in Normandy, overtook the Nazi fortifications in the north, and then started to push Nazi forces back towards Germany from the west. So that after this 1944 attack, on the success of the D-Day invasion, you had Nazi Germany being defeated in the east by the Soviet Union, as well as being pushed in from the west by the United States and British forces. So all of these 4 events together are considered the major turning points of World War II. 1941 especially, Nazi Germany, instead of continuing to bomb Great Britain, tried to invade the Soviet Union. They failed to defeat the Soviet Union as they had defeated every other country that they utilized the Blitz against. Instead, the Soviet Union started to defeat Nazi Germany and pushed them back from 1941 until 1945, when eventually the Nazis surrendered. The United States entered the war in 1941, and after 2.5 years, 1942, 1943, into 1944, the United States with the British launched Operation Overlord, or D-Day, so that the Nazis were being attacked from the west and the east. So hopefully all of that together should help you guys complete Exhibit 4. So you have to explain why each of these events was a turning point, or why it was important to the Allies eventually defeating the Nazis to end World War II. Of course, if you have any questions or concerns, you can pop into office hours Wednesday morning from 8 to 9, or from Thursday night from 7 to 8, or again Friday morning from 8 to 9, or you can email me and we can set something so I can answer your questions that way, whatever you guys want to do. I hope everyone is well and safe, and I'm sure I'll talk to you all soon.